After studying this module, you shall be able to know what about personality inventories and their historical development, learn the various strategies of structured personality test construction and their applications, identify the various personality inventories based on the different test construction strategies, analyze the advantages and disadvantages of the personality inventories. Personality inventories are one of the most common methods for assessing personality. There must be thousands of personality inventories in test that are available. Describing all of them is certainly not possible, and also it is not much of relevance as many of them have commonalities among them. A few of the most common ones that are used widely across cultures and nations have been described in the following few pages. Personality inventories are self-rating questionnaires that deal not only with the overt behavior, example, insisting on having one's own way, emotional expression, sympathetic acts, but also with the person's own feelings about himself, other person and his environment, resulting from introspection, liking to be alone and living introvertly, need for praise, repression of desires, caution and worry. Inventories evaluate aspects of personality that are beyond impressions made upon observers and resulting reputation they are more valuable instruments by Freeman in 1965. These are standardized instruments that are used to reveal aspects of personality and psychological makeup. The general procedure in which the subject is asked to respond to a written statement is known as a structured or objective method of personality assessment. As the name implies, structured measures of personality are characterized by structure and lack of ambiguity. A clear and definitive stimulus is provided and requirements of subjects are evident and specific by Kaplan and Scuso in 2010. Personality inventories based on different test construction strategies. The following are a very few of the very famous and popularly used personality inventories that are based on the test construction strategies that have been described above. Based on logical content strategy, Woodworth personal data sheet. As mentioned above, this was the first personality inventory ever. It was developed during World War I and was used to identify military recruits that are likely to break down in combat. It contained 116 questions to be answered in yes or no. The items were selected from a list of symptoms of emotional disorders. Some of the items are: do you drink a fifth of whiskey a day? The test yielded a single score, and through this the recruits were rejected by Kaplan and Scuso in 2010. The items were selected through the logical content approach. It also had two additional features. First, the items endorsed by 25% or more of a normal sample in the scaled direction were excluded from the test. This technique tended to reduce the number of false positives, that is, subjects identified by the test as risks but who would most likely be cleared in an actual interview. Second, only those symptoms that occurred twice as often in a previous diagnosed neurotic group as in normals were included in the first version of the test by Kaplan and Scuso in 2010. The Bell Adjustment Inventory. The Bell's Adjustment Inventory by Bell in 1963 is one of the most widely used measures of adjustment and is an effective screening device for identifying adjustment problems. The Bell Adjustment Inventory evaluates a subject's status in the domains of home, health, social adjustment, emotional adjustment and occupational adjustment. This inventory exists in two forms, one for children from class 9th to college and the other for adults. It has items such as: have your relationship with your father usually been pleasant? Do you have many headaches? Do you often feel lonesome even when you are with people? The Bell inventory has been criticized on the grounds such as: do the questions and scores for each category actually represent separate and distinct aspects of behavior and adjustment? Are they mutually exclusive? Critics hold the view that the same personality variables influence adjustments in all situations, and thus the more useful and significant inventory are those that probe on various psychological mechanisms such as hysteria, defense and escape mechanism by Freeman in 1965. However, it has been found useful while placing an individual relative to his group on the basis of specified areas of behavior. Despite criticism, this inventory is used widely and has been found to be useful. Theoretical strategy: Edwards Personal Preference Schedule, EPPS. The theoretical basis for EPPS is the need system proposed by Murray in 1938. The human needs as proposed by Murray include the need to accomplish achievement, the need to confirm, deference, and the need for attention, exhibition. Following the theoretical strategy, Edwards selected 15 needs from Murray's list and developed items. To deal with the problem of social desirability, he constructed his test in such a manner that required the subjects to select items in pairs that were roughly comparable on social desirability. Subjects cannot simply provide the socially desirable or expected response because both items in the pair are presumably equal on social desirability. Thus, there is no problem of faking and no problem of balancing scored item arises by Kaplan and Scuso in 2010. Also, to keep a check on validity, about 15 statements have been repeated over the test. With this, the test taking attitude can be gauged. Norms for this test are based on 1500 college men and women, about 9,000 general population adults. The norms are in the form of percentiles. As the subject chooses between two alternatives to make a choice, it results in what is called ipsative score. These scores present results in relative terms rather than as absolute totals. The reliability coefficients have been found to be between 0.74 to 0.88. All these advantages make this test one of the most researched of the personality inventories and is applied in various settings. However, there are certain disadvantages too, such as it has not been received well by receivers. By Hilburn in 1972. It has been found that the test can also be faked and also produce social desirable responses by Kaplan and Scuso in 2010. The EPPS is widely used in college counseling as a means of personal discovery. The Myers-Briggs type indicator. This test has been developed by Catherine Cook Briggs and Isabel Briggs Myers and was published in 1962. This test is based on the typology of personality proposed by Carl Gustav Jung. Jung theorized that there are four principal psychological functions by which we experience the world: sensation, intuition, feeling, and thinking by Kaplan and Scuso in 2009. Robert Kaplan and Dennis Scuso believe the underlying assumption of the MBTI is that we all have specific preference in the way we construe our experiences, and these preferences underlie our interests, needs, values, and motivation. It is designed to measure preference in how people perceive the world and make their decisions. The MBTI makes use of two dimensions, one irrational and the other rational functions. Irrational functions are sensation and intuition, and rational functions are thinking and feeling. The combination of these four results in 16 types of personality types. This inventory comes in a 166 item version, Form F, and 126 item version, Form G. Form F is the most widely used. The normative data is expressed in percentiles for the four indicator scores that are based on high school and college students. Reliabilities have found to be in between the range of 0.70s and 0.80s. Due to this inventory's worldwide use, it has been translated in more than 20 languages. This test is frequently used in career counseling, at organizations, for professional development, leadership training, etc. Criterion Group Strategy. The Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, MMPI and MMPI-2. This inventory is one of the most widely used assessment measure for personality and psychopathology by Kamara, Nathan and Punnett in 2000. It was developed by Stark R. Hathaway and J. C. McKinley in 1943. It is used in the field of forensic psychology, personal selection, clinical psychology, etc. It is used for individuals that are 16 years and above. It is a true, false self-report questionnaire. Some statements are: I like good food. I never have trouble falling asleep. The test has validity, clinical and content scales. Validity scales indicate the approach to testing and detect non-responding or inconsistent responding. Clinical scales identify psychological disorders such as depression, schizophrenia, etc. Content scale consists of groups of items empirically related to a specific content area. The latest version has 10 clinical scales that are different clinical classifications such as social introversion, hypochondriasis, depression, hysteria, psychopathetic deviate, etc. As this personality inventory is based on criterion strategy, the main purpose is to distinguish normal groups from abnormal groups and also assess for psychological problems. To update and expand the norms of MMPI, the MMPI-2 came into picture. It contained 567 items. The reasons for modifying the items were the use of outdated language, sexist language, awkward language, minor changes and simplifications. However, the interpretation remained the same. The feature of the MMPI-2 is the additional validity scales of variable response inconsistency scale, VRIN, and true response inconsistency scale, TRIN, that validate the response styles. The VRIN evaluates random responding and TRIN measures acquiescence, the tendency to mark true irrespective of the content. The MMPI-2 contains 15 content scales, including HEA, health concerns, and TPA that evaluates irritable, impatient, type A personality. Other content scales include FAM, family problems, and WRK, work interference. The psychometric properties of these tests are sound. The reliability coefficients of both versions of MMPI are high and range between 0.70 to 0.90. California Personality Inventory, Revised Edition. CPI is a personality test that was developed through the criterion group strategy in the year 1957. It contains 462 true-false items, including nearly items that are borrowed from MMPI. In contrast to MMPI, the CPI intends to evaluate personality in normally adjusted individuals, unlike the MMPI, which focuses on maladjustment or clinical diagnosis. The CPI was created to assess the everyday folk concepts that ordinary people use to describe the behavior of people around them, by Aiken in 2004. The test originally contained 18 scales, each of which was grouped into one of 4 classes. Class 1 scales measure poise, self-assurance and interpersonal effectiveness. Class 2 scales evaluate socialization, maturity and responsibility. Class 3 scales measures achievement, potential and intellectual efficiency. Class 4 scales evaluates interest modes, by Kaplan and Scuso in 2010. The revised CPI yields scores in 20 scales, including 3 measures designed to assess test-taking attitude. The validity scales are sense of well-being, WB, good impression, GI, and commonality, CM. These detect subjects that fake bad, fake good, and respond randomly respectively. The test takes about 45 minutes to an hour to be completed. Some of the items from the intermediate inventory are: do you keep working even if the job is hard? Do you find that a good many people are mean? The reliability data for CPI is quite satisfactory, living in the range of 0.50s to 0.80s. The norms for this test are based on normative sample of 6,000 males and 7,000 females across age, social class and geographic region. All scores are reported as T-scores. On critically evaluating the inventory, it can be said that this inventory is a good measure for understanding common interpersonal behaviors such as social skills, school relations, etc. It is a user-friendly test and can be administered easily. Also, due to the use of folk concept, it can be used in many cultures in society, by Groth and Marnett in 2009. However, despite its advantages, there are some weaknesses of the scale too. As factor analysis was not used, there is a high correlation amongst the scales that may be ultimately associated with the same underlying traits, by Hattrop in 2003. There is also a lack of theoretical justification of the criteria used in developing the folk concepts and special purpose scales. It is unclear as to why some scales, example dominance, are more basic and receive the status as folk concepts, whereas others are labeled as special purpose, by Hattrop in 2003. Some of the areas where its application are seen widely are the prediction of high school and college achievement, effectiveness of student teachers, grade point average in medical school, effectiveness of police and military personnel, and leadership and executive success by Gregory in 2011. The factor analytic strategy, the 16PF factor questionnaire, 16PF. This inventory was developed by Raymond B. Cattell, Maurice Tatsuko, and Herbert Eber in the year 1949. Cattell put to use the factor analysis technique to discover the traits of human personality. As the name suggests, it measures 16 primary source traits and the big 5 secondary traits by Russell and Carroll in 2002, Cattell, Eber and Tatsuko in 1970. These 16 factors emerged as a result of factor analyzing everyday behaviors to understand the basic traits behind them. The test has also been translated into many languages and used worldwide. This test is used in various life domains such as marital counseling, career counseling, employee development, and in the educational setting. This test is in its 5th edition that was released in the year 1993 by Cattell in 1993. The 2nd, 3rd and 4th editions were published in the years 1956, 1962 and 1969 respectively. The 5th edition now contains 185 multiple choice items. The test format includes answering to simple true or false questions to behavioral statements. The test provides scores on the 16 primary personality scales and 5 global personality scales, all of which are bipolar. The test also includes 3 validity scales, a bipolar impression management (IM) scale, an acquiescence scale (ACQ), and an infrequency scale (INF). It is appropriate to be used for ages 16 years and above. The test can be administered and scored both manually and through the computer. The primary factors that it measures are warmth, reasoning, emotional stability, dominance, liveliness, rule consciousness, social boldness, sensitivity, vigilance, abstractedness, privateness, apprehension, openness to change, self-reliance, perfectionism, and tension. Separate norms are provided for men alone, women alone, and men and women combined for 3 groups of adults, college students and high school seniors. 6 forms of the tests are available, 2 parallel forms for each of the 3 levels of vocabulary proficiency, ranging from newspaper literate adults through the educationally disadvantaged. A major shortcoming of the 16PF is that these 16 factors are based upon as few as 10 to 13 items making each factor. A test with such low number of items reduces the reliability. The reliability coefficients of the test range from 0.54 to 0.80. Combination strategies. This approach follows the premise of using mixed strategies for constructing inventories. Some of the tests that have been developed by this strategy are the Million Clinical Multi-Axial Inventory, MCMI. MCMI is a good measure of personality disorders as defined by the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, DSM-3, American Psychiatry Association, 1980. This inventory consists of 3 versions of the same test, namely MCMI, MCMI-2 and MCMI-3. The MCMI was published in 1983, MCMI-2 in 1987 and MCMI-3 in 1994. The MCMI-2 was a revision over the original version and included 2 new scales and also included the weighing scheme wherein a few items had greater weights than the other. MCMI-3 has 2 additional scales over the second version, namely depressive personality and post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. In total, the MCMI-3 includes 27 scales. The first 11 scale measures the personality types or traits such as narcissism and antisocial tendencies. The next 3 assesses more severe personality pathology, schizotypical, borderline and paranoid disorders. The following 7 scale assesses clinical syndrome such as anxiety and depression. The next 3 scales assesses severe clinical syndromes such as thought disorder. The last 3 scales are validity scales, response style indices. Scores on these scales, disclosure, desirability and debasements, are used to adjust the other scale scores upward or downward based on the defensiveness or exaggeration of symptoms respectively by Gregory in 2011. It is designed for the same purpose as the MMPI 2, that is, to provide useful information for psychiatric diagnosis. However, MCMI has advantages over the MMPI 2. It is shorter and thus easier to use, and it is planned and organized to identify clinical patterns in a manner that is compatible with Diagnostic and Statistical Manual DSM-4 of the American Psychiatric Association by Gregory in 2011. The Neo-Personality Inventory, NEOPIR. This test was developed by Paul T. Costa Jr. and Robert R. McRae and is a very popular measure of the big 5 personality traits: extraversion, agreeableness, conscientiousness, neuroticism, and openness to experience. There have been multiple revisions and additions in the original NEOPI inventory. The original version was published in 1978 and was called the Neuroticism Extroversion Openness Inventory, NEO-I. NEOPIR was published in 1990. The NEOPI 3, which is an update, has been published in 2005. The NEOPIR is a 240 item inventory with a shorter version called the NEO 5-factor inventory that has 60 items, 12 items for each of the big 5 traits. The items on the scale are answered on a 5-point Likert scale ranging from strongly disagree to strongly agree. The full version takes about 30 to 40 minutes for administration. The scoring indicates the test taker's domain levels and strengths-based description of 3 levels: high, medium and low in each domain. This test has been used cross-culturally and is used in varied contexts. The test developers used both factor analysis and theory in item development and scale construction. Reliability coefficients are in the high range for this test. NEOPIR reflects modern trends in personality test construction by its reliance on theory, logic and the liberal use of factor analysis and statistical approaches in test construction by Kaplan and Scuso in 2010. Summary: personality inventories are one of the most common methods for assessing personality. There must be thousands of personality inventory and tests that are available these days. Personality inventories are self-rating questionnaires that deal not only with the overt behavior but also with the person's own feelings about himself, other person and his environment resulting from introspection. The origins of personality testing date back to the 18th and the 19th centuries, when personality was assessed through phrenology, the measurement of the human skull, and physiognomy, which assessed personality based on the person's outer appearances, by Nizami and Butcher in 2000. One of the earliest modern personality tests was the Woodworth personality data sheet, a self-report inventory developed for World War I and used for the psychiatric screening of new draftees, by Nizami and Butcher in 2000. Test development happens through a progressive refinement process. There are various strategies upon which the personality test construction can be based. However, the most common and most agreed upon classification is based on strategies such as empirical and deductive approaches. There are various other strategies that fall under these 2 umbrellas. The deductive method begins by developing a theory for the construct of interest. It uses a theory that has been previously established. This may include the use of previously established theory. Under this strategy, the logical content strategy and the theoretical strategy fall. Logical content strategy method uses reason and deductive logic in the development of personality measure. The content is logically deduced that would also measure the characteristics. The items that are constructed are high on face validity. This approach is mostly used as a primary strategy for test construction, by Kaplan and Scuso in 2010. Theoretical strategy begins with the theory concerning the nature of the characteristics to be measured. The items are deduced and should be inconsistent with theory. Every item has to be related and to be in tandem to the theory being measured. Empirical strategy relies on data collection and statistical analysis to determine the meaning of a test response or the nature of personality. This strategy uses experimental research to determine empirically the meaning of the test response, by Kaplan and Scuso in 2010. Under this strategy, the criterion group strategy and the factor analytic strategy fall. Some examples of popularly used personality inventories as classified above are given below. Woodworth personal data sheet and the Bell Adjustment Inventory are based on logical content strategy. The Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, MMPI and MMPI-2, and California Personality Inventory, Revised Edition, are based on the Criterion Group Strategy. The 16 Personality Factor Questionnaire, 16PF, is based on the Factor Analytic Strategy. Edwards Personal Preference Schedule, EPPS, and the Mayer's Briggs Type Indicator are examples of the theoretical strategy. The Million Clinical Multi-Axial Inventories, MCMI, and the Neo-Personality Inventory, NEOPI, are based on the combination strategy. There are various advantages of greater weight than the disadvantages, and that is what makes them popular among clinicians, practitioners, etc. in a varied kind of settings. Personality inventories aims at tapping the strength of traits present in an individual.